Testing, testing. Darren, you getting me? And we are on air.
Announcements up. All right. I call the 2321st meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. This meeting is being conducted by video conference. The public has been invited to watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, Comcast Cable Channel 30 in city limits, or by logging into Zoom video conference as an attendee. The public may submit comments in writing by email to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. There will be opportunities for the public to give oral testimony during today's meeting. When it's time to take public comment, staff will monitor the email inbox, the Zoom participant window, and the Zoom chat to see if anyone would like to speak. We will take comments in the order that they are received and seen. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. If members of the public become disruptive, we will mute and remove them from the video conference. If that fails to stop the disruptions, we will recess the meeting and return within 5 minutes. If we are unable to continue, council will briefly meet off-air to move unfinished business to the next council agenda. All right, so please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalyapuya Etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. The city invites, so I'm going to do announcements now. They're all in this script. The city invites its Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and Spanish-speaking community members to live, work, and own business or go to school in the city limits to participate in a virtual listening session on Thursday, September 10th from 6 to 9 p.m. Participants will be provided dinner for you and your family delivered right to your home. Sign up today by emailing Brenna Cruz at rsvp@milwaukieoregon.gov. The Arts Committee invites the community to create music from their homes or walk and bike around the city to enjoy the sounds. This new concert series called Porch Fest continues on September 4th and 11th from 7 to 8 p.m. on both nights. Please remember that physical distancing is still in effect, so please don't form crowds, encroach on private property, or stand within 6 feet of others while listening to performances. I have to say this has been a wildly successful event. Everybody I have spoken with at them is completely enchanted by them. They all wish they will go forever, and they all wish they could be a little longer than 1 hour. So good job, Arts Committee. The first Friday virtual poetry reading open mic event returns in September. Featured readers and submissions will be shared on the Letting Library's Facebook page on September 4th.
That was Friday, September 4th, and it's at 5 p.m.
What did I say? February. That's hilarious. Thank you. Metro, our regional government, is currently seeking members for its Committee on Racial Equity. If you have a lived or professional experience advocating for racial justice in the greater Portland area, please consider applying for one of the open positions. Applications are due by September 6th. For more information about each of these events and others, please visit the city's homepage where you will find the city calendar at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. All right, on to our first item, the American Legion Day Proclamation, and this will be presented. I didn't see Chaplain Jerry Craig, so this will be presented by our Legion Post 180 Commander, Mike Wilson.
Well, thank you, Mary Gamba. Members of the City Council, I'd like to take just a few moments to update you on the Milwaukie American Legion Post. Although we were unable to hold our annual state convention, the Milwaukie Post was recognized for several awards, receiving 17 state awards out of 27 categories, 116 posts with over 15,000 members in the state of Oregon, members of the American Legion. The Milwaukie Post received some significant awards: community service, children and youth services, public relations, honor and color guard, law officer of the year, teacher of the year, Legionnaire of the Year. Milwaukie Post 180 continues to take pride in our community and working with the city. We've increased our membership from 500 members to 625 over the last year. These members, I believe, have been, this increase in membership, I believe, has been successful because we are an active post engaged in addressing the needs of our community. I'll take time now to read this proclamation. City of Milwaukie Proclamation. Whereas the American Legion was chartered by Congress on September 16, 1919 as a wartime veterans organization based on the 4 pillars of Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation, National Security, Americanism, and Children and Youth. And whereas the American Legion has become a preeminent community service organization with more than 2.5 million members in over 14,000 posts worldwide, supporting a variety of programs to benefit our nation's veterans, its service members, their families, the youth of America, and its citizens. And whereas Legionnaires uphold the ideals of freedom and democracy while working to make a difference in the lives of all Americans. And whereas the City of Milwaukie enjoys a strong partnership with American Legion Post 180 and its affiliated units and organizations. And whereas the 2020 observance of American Legion Day provides an opportunity to recognize Legionnaires in our community for their many civic contributions. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas, in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim September 16, 2020 as American Legion Day in the City of Milwaukie, and do hereby commend its observance to all citizens of the Dogwood City of the West. And witness, therefore, and with the consent of the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, I have hereunto set my hand on this first day of September 2020. Mark Gamba, Mayor, attested. Scott Stauffer, City Recorder. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. All right, let me find my script here. I think our next item is the Constitution Week Proclamation with Susanna Lee Barlow, chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution, Regent Phyllis Hines. And I think Ellie Nelson is also going to. Are you both doing it? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. Constitution Week was initiated by the Daughters of the American Revolution. The DAR is a patriotic organization that encourages education and historic preservation in the communities across America. September 17th to 23rd is Constitution Week. In 1955, the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution petitioned Congress with a resolution. This week of observance for the foundation of the American form of government was signed into law by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on August 2nd, 1956. The commitment of the NSDAR is to encourage study and educate the public about the Constitution, which was adopted by the American Congress of the Confederation on September 17th, 1787. We kick off Constitution Week with September 17th, ringing bells across the country. The bells will be rung 4 o'clock Eastern time, and then each zone in their matching time. So in Oregon, we'll be ringing bells at 1 o'clock on the 17th in honor of our Constitution. And this year, our chapter attends schools and rings bells, and we bring them in our homes. This year's going to be different, and we'll be doing some virtual bell ringing together, where we'll read the preamble and ring bells and respect our Constitution. Ellie?
Good evening, Mayor Gamba, council members, and all citizens of Milwaukie that will hear my voice. My name is Ellie Nelson, and I am a proud member of Daughters of the American Revolution and have been a resident of Milwaukie since 1960. I speak tonight on the importance of bringing a copy of the Constitution into your home. The paper and ink version, my generation is more at home with, and the electronic version that is readily available on the internet. Every household would benefit from this important document being available to study, to have for personal reference, to teach our children and to teach our grandchildren. Even friends of our children will benefit from having this valuable reference available when questions are brought up in conversation. I urge you to honor the Constitution and its week beginning 17th of September by personally reviewing this historic and essential document with its amendments. And thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like me to read the proclamation?
Please.
All right. Whereas we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, did ordain and establish a Constitution for the United States of America. And whereas September 17th, 2020 marks the 233rd anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution by a convention of the states, and whereas it is fitting to recognize this essential document on the anniversary of its adoption in accordance with Public Law 915, which guarantees that a proclamation will be issued annually by the President of the United States, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim September 17th through 23rd, 2020 as Constitution Week in the City of Milwaukie, and do commend its observance by all citizens. All right. Thank you very much, Ellie and Phyllis.
Thank you for reading it. Thank you.
You betcha. And Mike, I didn't get to say, but congratulations on all your awards. That was really impressive. Mm-hmm. Very impressive.
Very much.
Okay. Let's see. Our next item. We have no special reports. So community comments. Scott, we got anything? Anybody waiting to do this?
Checking now, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the inbox. There's no email. And I see none of we have 2 attendees, and I don't see either hand raised for interest. Council has received a number of correspondence today, but they are related to the Slow Streets program, which we'll talk about momentarily.
All right. Well, then, in that case, I will not read all of this. Is there a follow-up from the August 18th community meeting that's over?
No, there's not. There were no comments made at the meeting.
All right. Thank you. All right. Tonight's consent agenda includes the minutes of the July 21st, 2020 regular session, the August 4th, 2020 work session, and the August 4th, 2020 regular session. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I do. I had it pulled up in, let's see, the minutes of the August 4th session I would like to pull just for a very quick discussion and a small correction.
Regular or work?
Work.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to approve the other two.
So moved.
Yeah, I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda, excluding the August 4th, 2020 work session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard or seen. All right, Kathy, what's the corrections?
Yeah, it's just on RS 16 and RS 17. We were talking about public discussion around goal setting, and I just wanted to be very careful about our language there because Councillor Parks and I had both expressed some concerns about the conversation setting unrealistic expectations for the public around making it seem like we're just going to adopt wholesale whatever we hear from the public, and I wanted to be careful not to represent it that way. In particular, I was concerned with the sentence at the very top of RS 17, where it says Ms. Ober summarized that council wanted to hold a public goal setting session next summer. We did talk about that. I just want to rephrase that very slightly so that it's not a public goal setting session, but a session to collect public input on goals. I think those are two different things depending on who you are reading this.
I also appreciate that Councillor Heisey checked with me since it's attributed to me, and I agree with her that that was my intent.
Yeah.
Can you rephrase that real quick, Kathy? You wanted to say, wanted to hold a public goal, instead of goal setting session, you had a different phrase there. What was it?
A session to receive public input. I actually don't know. I had it. I
Public
said
input. I get it.
I wish I'd written it down.
On goal, a public input on city council goals or something like that.
Yeah, we wanted to hold a session to receive public input on council goals.
So basically strike setting and public goal input session or something along those lines.
Right. Input, not make it very clear that this is not going to be a session wherein we say, here, public, tell us what our goals are going to be. That was it.
Okay. You got it, Scott?
Got it. And I didn't write these sets. I helped Amy wrote them. But to my mind, no objections from staff.
Great.
Okay. Then Kathy, would you make a motion to approve as edited?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes from the August 4th, 2020 council work session as amended.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the August 4th, 2020 work session minutes as amended. Any further conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. It also passes unanimously. Okie doke. So our next item is the Slow Streets Program, a discussion, and this will be presented by our Assistant City Manager, Kelly Brooks.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And then I also have Steve Adams, who's going to join me for part of the presentation tonight as well. He was integral to the program. So the goal for tonight is really just to kind of recap of why we did the project, and then walk through some of what we learned through doing it and any next steps that we have. The project is officially, as you read in the staff report, coming to a close after the Labor Day weekend. And just to talk about kind of how we got here. So we had received some input back in the spring saying, hey, Portland's doing some different closures throughout the city to help make it easier for people to walk and bike. Have you all considered doing something similar, concerned about traffic? And so Steve helped me come up with some different possible locations. We did some outreach to the Hector Campbell neighborhood about a potential location, and Island Station about a location as well. Hector Campbell wasn't interested in proceeding with that, so we just focused on the Island Station demonstration project. We did have some high-level criteria that we did put into helping us determine what sites might be best. We wanted to make sure that it could be safe, so we wanted to have it in a location where we were pretty sure we wouldn't have high diversion once the barriers went in. We also wanted to do it in a place with low-speed streets, again, because we don't want people running into barriers and causing additional unintended safety issues by putting up lower profile barriers. We also wanted to make sure this wasn't a budgeted item, so we were doing it kind of on the fly. So we needed to be able to do it with what we had, so existing staff and existing budgeted materials. And then we also wanted to make sure it was in a place that people wanted it. So in this case, what that actually ended up meaning is it did put a lot of emphasis on NDA input and NDA participation. We didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of extensive outreach. So I wanted to make sure for the folks that it was going to be right outside their door, that they had a chance to know about it and talk about it and ask questions. So most of my outreach really was centered on the Island Station NDA in terms of talking over the proposed closure and what changes they would like to see. And have Steve bring up the actual closure area in a minute so you can see it and he can talk through the different elements. But we did present we had an initial idea. We had heard back from folks on Sparrow that they were concerned that a lot of the diverted traffic was going to end up on Sparrow and cause additional concern. So we did bring we revised the closure boundaries based on that input. I think with that, I'm actually going to have Steve, I'm going to let you actually pull up, if you can, the actual area where we put the barriers and then what we did to the parking lot. So there were three-ish major elements. We had barricades that we put up, 6 in total, that said local access only. So the point was to not keep everyone out, but to try to keep cars from driving through. And Steve will show you where those went. We also leased a parking lot temporarily with the Espinars, who were great partners in this. And we striped it so that it had some flow to it. Most of the markings had been worn off, and they had been experiencing a lot of overflow parking anyway, and it was sometimes blocking their access to the home. So in part of our conversation with them, we said, well, we'll make it more clear where people are supposed to be with striping and some signage changes. And then last but not least, we actually did just a bunch of signing changes. So we created an ADA spot that we didn't have down by the park before. We added that. We put bike parking in one of the spots, again, to try to just provide another way for people to get to the park without using their car. And also because we'd heard a lot of concerns from park users about conflicts with cyclists on the trail. So the bikes, that had been something we'd done before, but we actually bolted it down as a part of this project. And then we also created a loading zone. Steve, he'll jump in a minute. We called it something else at first. I think we called it authorized vehicle parking, the intent being that we were going to have like NCPRD or city vehicles would have a place to park. That didn't work at all. Loading zone actually worked pretty well. And we observed people using it and for drop-off purposes. So that's what the 3 spots down by the park were. But that we also, throughout the course of the pilot, made additional no parking signage, which Steve will show you. We made quite a few different signage changes throughout based on just feedback we were hearing as we went. So with that, Steve, if you're ready, I'm going to just hand it off to you to talk about just the particulars of the closure area.
Okay, sorry, forgot I was on mute. Can everybody see my screen I've shared? Okay, so this is the schematic of where we first thought where we're going back in May on this. It's been edited a few times to reflect some changes as the program went through. So again, as everybody who has been down there, who lives down there, the primary barricades were on Bluebird, Bob White, and Wren. Bluebird had a type 3 barricade, which was the larger, taller one. We had a smaller run out the first weekend, and people seemed to ignore it too much. We tried to go with the bigger one. We also had a smaller one on Sparrow the first weekend, and then we went to a bigger one, trying to make it people would notice it more. And it was placed right across from the old Amadeus parking lot. As time went on, we found a lot of cars still parking on Sparrow, this time on both sides, which became a hazard in that it wasn't a wide enough area left for emergency response vehicles. So Public Works went out and installed no parking on smaller barricades on the south side of Sparrow, all the way up to 21st. And that did resolve the problem, people parking on the south side. In Spring Park itself, we added an ADA parking spot, which per U.S. Access Board standards is required anytime you mark spaces on. So we're actually out of compliance for a little while till we got that one added. Another parking spot we made into a bike rack. And the third one started off as an authorized use vehicle only. That seemed to get ignored a lot. And then someone actually then took the sign and tore it in half. So rather than replace it, we changed it out to a 10-minute loading zone. And that one seemed to garner a lot more respect. And the sign's still up. We'll still up right now. And I think people were, when I was down there, people were obeying it. People were pulling up, unloading stuff, and they weren't parking there. So that sign worked a lot better than authorized vehicles only. The times I visited the area, the parking lot was pretty well maxed out, pretty close. 48 cars is about the most you could put in there. So even though we striped it for 27, there were a lot of extra vehicles parked along the edges, and it still left a drive lane. It was pretty tight in some of the corners, but people seemed to be managing it. And
I just want to interject quickly that the Espinors actually moved the barricade on the east side of the parking lot. They moved it closer to their driveway entrance to allow people to have more room.
Oh, that was very nice of them.
That's part of how we were able to squeeze more cars in there.
Okay, thank you. From my observation there, I thought the cars parking there were very polite in that I never saw cars park on the east side of the barricade where it said private parking. Perhaps other days there were. When I was there, they were always in the public parking side of the parking lot. There are pinch points, especially along 19th. It's just not that wide of a street. And when you get a lot of vehicles, I do not know if these were overflow vehicles from the lot or just people who just didn't like parking and walking and wanted to create their own parking spot closer. But there were a lot of areas where it was pinch points and tight and would not be legal as far as getting a first responder access to the area. And then also we heard, and I saw on one occasion, cars parked pretty close to the intersection of 21st and Sparrow, which is dangerous because it blocks the view of vehicles coming from the other direction. So it makes it a bit of a safety hazard. So I think there are some things we can do with permanent no parking signage there to make it an improved neighborhood. But it was a very popular program, and routinely, from my understanding, talking to citizens and the live in the area, it was routinely packed with cars. And depending how you look at it, that's a great success for those who want access to the river, and for those who want less people in their neighborhood, they probably weren't very happy by it. Okay, but again, the barricades, I think next week what we're going to do to try to prevent too many cars from parking in the parking lot once the program closes down on the 8th is to move the barricades to the parking lot and set up signage on them explaining that the program has come to an end and to please not park here. Because I believe we've rented the lot for the month. Kelly might know more about how the tollway will work with the Espinars, but eventually it'll be a place where if you park, you're going to get your car towed. I didn't really want to throw a lot of people into that possible dilemma of being parking there for weeks on end, and all of a sudden you show up and get your car towed. So we have some buffer time for people to get used to not parking there.
Well, the way it's going to work is, so I think that they're going up tomorrow. I've asked that they go up tomorrow. So there'll be notices posted in the parking lot that says it's closing and that it will close after Labor Day. Peter asked for a little bit of flex time between the 8th and the 9th to get everything moved around. But everything we're saying to the public is that Labor Day is the last day. Peter will then, his crews will go down and move the barricades, some of the barricades, to actually block off the lot. So that it's closed. And eventually those barricades will come out. But for the first couple of weeks, we're going to close it off because while that will be, it is going to be a transition, but absent that, we could have people paying really high tow fees because maybe they don't know. So we want to make it really clear that the lot's closed. So the Espinors have the towing contract, the city does not. But because we have been, we did stripe it, it looks like a parking lot, we need to have a period of time where it's very clear that the parking lot is closed. So we will be doing that with barricades, and then we're putting the signage up in the lot, and we're also doing some social media posts about it. So that's what we're heading into next week. I think for me, I just want to hit on a couple kind of high level findings. Steve talked through the usage. I think this was an interesting one for me. We picked it in part because it met a lot of these criteria. We had low volume streets. I was really confident that I wasn't going to have a lot of diversion because of just the nature of Island Station. I think, and we knew we had a really highly desirable, likely very crowded destination because it's been getting more crowded anyway. So all of that pointed to it would be nice to have more space. I think I was surprised that I did get some more comments in today that I hadn't heard before today, which made it sound like for the folks on 19th that I hadn't heard from actually did view it as more of an amenity. It was really folks on Sparrow that did not view it as an amenity and didn't feel that it addressed their safety concerns and felt strongly that the presence of the lot brings more people. And so I think I did characterize it as, in some ways, this really didn't work. It ended up taking quite a bit of time and money to do it. And it's going to take more time and money to close it down. I think it was, I will say, the conversation with the neighbors, I really appreciated. Everyone has been really civil with me and understanding and been open to talking with me about it. So I appreciate everyone who's reached out to me. I will say for such a small area, it really wasn't, it's pretty split in terms of who likes it and who doesn't. It's not universally, oh yeah, the neighborhood loved doing this. We found it to be an amenity. We love it. It didn't have that effect. In fact, quite a few people mentioned that they felt like it was less safe because there were more people on the roads. But people were still driving kind of the same. And I don't know exactly why that is. I think the nature of the Island Station neighborhood is there's a lot of natural traffic calming happening because of the railroad trestles. I mean, the streets are pretty narrow as they are. Like, there's a lot that's already happening there. So potentially adding these barriers didn't have the same effect that it would have had in a different type of street with like more right away, and and so that was kind of interesting to me. But I think my biggest takeaway from this is I guess I'd kind of hoped that it might help with kind of managing demand, and my main takeaway is it doesn't. It was great. It helps. I think it provided access to people who needed a place to go. I do. I think that I just didn't set that out as a goal, right? I didn't say we're creating this parking lot to provide more access to Spring Park right now, right? I created the parking lot because I was closing off access to the existing parking lot. I had to make the closure the way we had it set up. I needed another place for people to be and to turn around, or the closure wouldn't work. If I'd picked different things to measure, I might be talking about this a little bit differently, because I guess I do hope that, some folks were able to access this resource in a time when they didn't have many other options. And I feel good about that. But what happens is we don't have all the other wraparound policy elements or program elements to manage the natural resources issues that are here. And so I think for me, what I touched on it in the report, I think we did this as a demonstration project to see if we might want to do it in other places. And it's so unique that I didn't learn that. I didn't learn, I should do this somewhere else, because I mentioned, I think I have a trailhead. I have this kind of gateway community that's serving a really unique function within the city that doesn't actually, other neighborhoods aren't experiencing the same thing. So I learned some things, I didn't learn other things, but I think I did realize, or I guess moving forward, it's not a transportation hammer doesn't fix a natural resources management problem necessarily. And so what you're getting back in a lot of the comments is still like, hey, but I'm just worried that too many people are here. I'm worried about what people are doing there. There's fires, there's camping, there's things that seem incompatible with the natural area and how are you going to deal with that, which is far outside the scope of what a kind of a slow streets program would do. But those are the issues that we're hearing coming back, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of great solutions. The same these are long-standing issues that have been occurring. They are getting more pronounced. I just want to be real frank that the issues of wanting to get to this place were there before, but they're more. And I'm speaking to two people who live in the neighborhood and can talk about this much more directly than I can. And we not only were seeing people trying to get to Elk Rock Island and Spring Park, but we're seeing people try to get to Milwaukie Bay. People are parking there to get to other river access. So this drive to get to the river and want to get to the river is very real, and it is not going away with or without this parking lot. Now, I don't think that means that, there could be absolutely some increased use that occurred because it was easier to access. And I want to acknowledge the concerns of the neighbors on that part, right? Some people may have come that wouldn't have come otherwise because they had a place to park. But I also don't want to...
I have to interrupt you.
It's okay.
Because you keep talking about having created a parking lot. We did not create a parking lot. What we did was we entered into a contractual agreement with people who privately owned an already paved area that was a parking lot previously. And we agreed that we would provide striping and some oversight of trash. That site was already being used informally by people who are coming to the park and saying, oh, look, there's all this space up here. The roads it's crowded on the street. I'm going to park up here. And I was regularly seeing cars up there, not to the level of 48, but you would see a dozen cars there in April. So I got to push back a little on we created this parking lot.
Thank you it's actually a really good point, and I'm being sloppy in my language there. You're absolutely right. The parking lot was there and had been in use prior to this. So absolutely, 100%.
And the other point is that, I don't think we'll ever know to what degree it invited return visits, but I will tell you, I was working with the Friends of Elk Rock Island and Spring Park on July 3rd and 4th, masked up and interviewing people as they left the park. And one of the questions on the little survey was, how often do you come to the park? And there were a fair number of first-time visitors because there had been a kids' summer camp there, and there were 4 different families I talked to where the kid had been there for summer camp, and so he had brought his family to see the cool place he'd been at for summer camp. So there were some first-time users, but definitely the majority of users were repeat visitors, and many who said they had been there 4 or 5 times in the past month. So the idea that come July 1, we suddenly made something known that wasn't known is just really not true. And the other thing, I appreciate that you guys came to the neighborhood meeting last week or 2 weeks ago. You heard, I can tell that what you heard at that meeting influenced sort of the way you phrased some things in the report. I think the verdict is much more mixed than your report actually indicates. And we saw some of that in the comments we got from people today. My perception, I'm sorry that it didn't slow people on, I'm sorry and surprised, frankly, that it didn't slow cars on Sparrow. And I wish we had done some actual traffic counts and monitoring before to know for sure that it didn't slow people on Sparrow. But my perception is totally that it slowed people on 19th. And I've had several neighbors tell me that, including Alicia Hamilton, who has not written in, but probably will write in to tell us that they do perceive that it didn't really reduce the number of cars, but that it reduced speeds. And that is totally my experience as well.
That's really, really valuable. I appreciate that. And Steve does have some data he's going to talk about in a minute.
We also have a public question that I just want to put in there before Steve starts talking again. And that is from Sid. Are we going to, let's see, we were told traffic is currently being monitored in Island Station. Is that happening? Where and for how long?
That's what Steve's about to talk about, if that's okay. Before Steve goes there, I'm just going to say, we are going to talk about the traffic data, and we have some next steps on that too. My whole long, potentially not very well done lead up though, was just to say that there are going to be a lot of people that still want to come here who are not going to be able to park in this lot. So I want that to be I don't want to try to be vague about it at all. So there's going to still be demand of people who want to come here and want to park. And I just don't want that to come as a surprise to anyone when we close the project down. So with that, I'm actually just going to hand it off to Steve.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go. I can make my comment after you're done.
Okay. So with the program closing down, I did push staff to put our engineering traffic counters out on the project so we could get an idea of how things were. So over the last 2 weekends, we've had them out. First time we put one on Sparrow, just, or you can see the map where it's located, just west of 21st, and one on 21st, just north of Sparrow. We did that because we heard a lot of people wanting a stop sign at 21st and Sparrow, and we also heard a lot of conversation about too much traffic, too much speed on Sparrow. So these are out there for 5 days. Speed limit's 15. You can see the average speed on Sparrow, 17.4. So it could be a little bit better. You'll see the other streets are all quite a bit lower than that. 85th percentile speed was 21. So this is a little bit higher than I would like to see. Traffic counts, 285 roughly. So it was by far the most popular street to get in and out by everybody, including residents, whoever else was there. The 21st Avenue traffic data, you can see where the average traffic plummets to 17 vehicles a day. So very, very few cars traveled in front of this counter over the weekend we had it out there, which would be a week before what we just had. There's the speeds were much better, 15.8 mile per hour, 19. So relatively quiet, really, compared to many of our residential areas around our city. And then the other one is we put them out on 19th in a couple of places. And these were just this last weekend. So these were just taken down yesterday, the 31st. And on 19th, these were actually done in coordination with Pam Denham, the Island Station representative to PSAC. I put an email out to her saying, hey, we got the ones done at Sparrow on 21st. I'd like to put at least one on 19th. And she said, well, go ahead and put both on 19th. So this is where we had them, 2 consecutive blocks on 19th. And Ren to Bobway, it can be expected, had a little more traffic, but still minuscule, 99 vehicles per day. Average speed 16. 85th percentile was 19. And then between the next block north, average speed 15.1 and 85th 17. So Bluebird and Bobway is actually a very quiet street. And even these speeds are both pretty low. And the vehicle counts are very low. A lot of residential streets will carry 400 to 800 vehicles a day. It's a quite common number to see. So these tell me that outside of Sparrow, which is a little bit high, we're not seeing a huge amount of vehicles. We're not seeing speeding problems for the vast majority of drivers out there.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Does that count both directions, or is it only counting people going one direction?
Our counters count both directions.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and they add them up. So I'd like to go back out again, say late October, early November, and do another count to see what it looks like without the background influence of people heading to the river, and that will give me a better comparison to see if speeds go up or down with number of vehicles out there. Typically, the studies you read about will say that the more clutter, which parallel parked car on the street is clutter to a way, it narrows the visual driving of the street, and most people feel unsafe with too much stuff on the street, and they will slow down. So this is taken over the weekend and maybe a Friday and a Monday. And so if you looked, and I haven't had a chance, I just got this to me this afternoon at 5:30. I haven't a chance to look at the daily. I would almost estimate that the speed on Saturday and Sunday, when there's more cars parked on the street, probably is lower than what we see here. And when there's fewer cars parked on the street, the speed could very likely go up. But I want to do a little more breakdown of the data between a Saturday, Sunday, and a Friday, Monday, and then come back again in the cooler time of year to see what speeds are like then.
Steve, I don't know if you have the chat open, but if you wouldn't mind opening the chat on your computer just so that you can see the public questions that have come in from Sid, and then give us some amount of response.
Okay, so So yeah, the monitors were just taken down yesterday. So we covered the 2 weekends. They're in use someplace else right now, but I said we wanted to go out there. And actually, owning the monitors, we could put them out there on a more of a regular basis if people are really curious what's going up. It depends on, as neighborhood demand goes up and concerns come up, I try to place the counters out to collect data so I have actual numbers to talk about when someone's talking about speeding. And then we pulled it after 5 days because there was another place we needed to do counts last week on Washington and 27th in order to submit an application for a state grant for Safe Routes to School grant. So we had to collect some quick data on that. So I got pulled off this job, put over there for a few days to collect data midweek, then put back over on 19th on Friday. So that's why we don't have 2 full weeks of data, is that they're, again, high demand and trying to get, what are we asking for? $2 or $3 million grant for our Milwaukie L20 Safe Routes to School CIP project. The information is useful. Okay, so on the ones on Sparrow and 21st, there have been a lot of talk about wanting a stop sign, 3-way stop there. If you're familiar with the MUTCD, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a national publication trying to give guidance on how and when and where and what type of signage and striping to put up. They recommend 3-way or 4-way stops only, one, if they're both local streets when the volumes are roughly equal, or when one street is a collector or arterial and the other is a lower classification of street, i.e. a local street, then you put a stop sign up. So with the Sparrow and 21st count being so different, 19 versus 200 and something, it's not recommended to put a stop, 3-way stop there. So that's why we got those counts. And true, if we had done this in June, we'd have informed us for the summer. Counts don't change much throughout the year, though. That's why I want to go back in October, November, get counts. We can even go back next spring and get counts and see what's going on. We own the counter, so there's no cost to us outside of me paying a staff person or my budget paying a staff person to go out and set them up and collect them and get the data. So again, our counters are going to be used more and more this coming year. And actually,
Can I jump in on one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm seeing a lot of, I appreciate your responses too, but I just want to give one bit of context too, and for others that might be looking at this. So this is an amazingly long period of time and an amount of focus to spend in an area with no crash history. So just so you know, across the city, we have much higher speed streets and issues that we need to investigate as well. And so that is something I just need to start kind of talking through too. Citywide is, we don't have that many people or that many resources. These are our counters. And so it may not feel like much, but it actually is a lot. This is actually a lot more counting and a lot more data than we've collected in other areas of the city because we did this project here. And part of the reason why we were able to do this project here is because I had fairly high confidence that I had these kind of numbers or what we would see. So that I was less worried that we would have collisions and other issues. So I just want to say that if the expectation is that you can ask and we can get them out here right away, or that they probably not, because we may actually, and I know we actually do have other parts of the city where we could have a very pressing safety concern and crash history, maybe even a recent crash, as awful as that is, that we have to really consider when we're deploying these resources across the city. So I just want to put that out there for the record as well.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Kelly. Very true. We use these a lot on our projects to do a count before a project is started and do a count after the project is done to see what effect our project may have had on speeds or number of cars. As far as the only time of year you don't get great data is Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if it snows during the wintertime, you really don't want to have them out. Summers, in a typical year, summers aren't great times to collect data either because of schools being out of session. Again, this being Island Station, this being an area with a lot of people using the river, I wanted to get an idea of how many vehicles were there. And again, coming back in, say, November, when it's 50 degrees out and raining, it will have just the background count of residents. And that'll give us a good idea then on how many people came and if the speeds went up or down with the extra vehicles and cars parked.
So I think that's most of, I can't remember, how am I doing on time? Am I messing up? I wanted to make sure you had plenty of time to ask us questions that or ideas that you had. Mayor, I believe you had a comment, and I don't know that you got to make it or ask your question.
No, I didn't. I just want us to all be cognizant as we're thinking about the data and what the neighborhood experienced during this pilot. In a way, this was not a super good pilot if we're trying to think about, how do we slow down a street to make it more compatible for bike ped? Because this, as you say, is a trailhead, and every outdoor space, natural area within a 3-hour drive of Portland is hammered right now. Hammered. People are going out way more than they have ever done before because they've got nothing else to do. And being that we are, a 10-minute drive for a whole lot of people, that this place is going to be particularly highly used. So, the neighborhood feeling like it brought more people, I really doubt that this project brought more people. What brought more people was the pandemic and people feeling cabin fever. We just had enough foresight to realize that was going to happen and created a project to make it far more tolerable for the neighborhood than it would have been otherwise. But I think trying to take away, information, data on was this a good project? Did we do it right? Did it hit the targets we were after? I don't know that any of this is going to be relevant anywhere else in the city because it's not a trailhead, and hopefully going forward it won't be a pandemic. So that was, I think it was the comments that I heard from people was they were very happy with what we did. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are disappointed that it's going away, frankly. But good job to the whole team for pulling this off the way you did.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I hear what the mayor is saying. I do think that there is probably a lesson learned around the amount of time it takes to do a slow streets project. And I know that some of this experience is not representative of what it would take someplace that is not a trailhead, but I do think we learned that it does take a lot of public outreach. It does take staff time. There is management that is associated with it. So it just comes to mind for me when we want to be PBOT. We want to be able to have lots of greenways available to people, but it takes a lot to do this. And we don't have 100 employees that are solely dedicated to transportation within our city. So it would work. I'm sure it would work very differently in a different place in the city, but I still think it would take quite a bit of staff time and investment of some city resources.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree with that.
I appreciate those comments. I also wanted to say I was a little Debbie Downer probably in my staff report, so sorry if I didn't highlight all the positive. I was writing it on a Sunday. I wasn't as Pollyanna about it as I could have been, but I do want to say, I don't think I mentioned it in here, the sign campaign was a raging success. I didn't talk about it, but I probably should have. Everyone loves the signs. And so I do feel really good about that. And actually, I should send it to you all. Jacob Sherman, who you all know is on our planning commission now, he'd sent this really amazing picture yesterday of a young boy who's a wheelchair user. And the mom was like, we had one of our signs out that showed a mobility device user, and his mom's like pointing it out, and like they're like in this, they're using the right of way, they're out like getting fresh air, and then seeing themselves represented in this sign, and it was amazing, So I think I learned from that too about just the representation and inclusivity around active transportation and the things that we can do that actually aren't a 2-month demonstration project, that actually they really did help too. So, but yes, I do think I know more now about where we would do this if we do it again.
Mayor, there also, we received a large number of public comments for this discussion in writing over the course of today. But we also have, it looks like, some individuals who didn't realize or may want to comment. So I'm passing that off to you if you want to call on them.
Okay, is that in the chat? Because I'm not seeing.
There's a Sid has their hand raised, and
so look up the participants list. Okay.
Under attendees, I can click the button "Allow to Talk" if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. Let's absolutely take public comment on this.
Okay, Sid, we've clicked "Allow to Talk." Sid, can you hear it? It looks like you're here.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So you have in your packet the letter that I wrote in, but I'd like to thank Kelly for the amount of time and energy she spent on our neighborhood association meetings and being so smiley when people were not so smiley. So with all of this happening, I've come to understand that North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District run the park. And what Kelly and Steve are doing is trying to run our streets and figure out how to deal with the park, which are two entirely different animals. I contacted the people in charge of our park at NCPD PRD and asked them about some of the rules in the park and how they're enforced. The fact that the park closes at 30 minutes after dusk was a delight to find out. But then what it says in the rules is that cars will be towed if they have not left the park. So I went down and visited the Oak Grove Park, the Meldrum Bar Park, and watched cars being towed away because their parking lot is very obviously a parking lot for their park. So I don't know. I don't think this is going away. I think the park's been found. I think next summer, COVID or not, we're going to have a load of people here. I don't know if that means we need stickers for the cars for the people who live here and the people who don't live here are being towed away or being ticketed. I also had a chat with the chief about this once, and I was told that they will not send one officer into the park to monitor the situation. That wouldn't be safe. They have to send two. And if they send two and it's a very small group of individuals that are on call at that time in police vehicles, then that's too many of their officers being out on the island in case something bad happens across town, which I totally get. So I know that we pay North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District to pick up the trash and clean the porta potty, but I can't put my finger on who's supposed to monitor the park. So we've got fires. The grass is completely dry. The fire truck was actually here today trying to get hoses from a street all the way out to the park. We had a police officer here today with a man who was raising a ruckus down at the corner, actually two cars. But we're not monitoring the park. So you'll see at the end of my letter, I have some questions. Are we not going to have it as a nature preserve anymore? Are we going to pave those paths? Do we get rid of the playground and pave a parking lot? Do we not keep pretending like what the neighbors, what the Friends of Elk Rock Island put together is still what we want? So I don't know when we get a new plan for this park. And I think Kelly mentioned a couple of meetings ago that the most current plan for the park is 6 to 8 years old or something. I can't remember what the amount of years were. So with all of that being said, I still think cars are driving too fast in Sparrow. That's just me. I'm an old lady in her front yard 3 hours a day yelling, slow down, slow down. But then the other thing I'm concerned about is the fact that the park's trashed. The graffiti is on all the rocks now. The wildlife that had been planted by the neighbors is trampled and gone. Fires are being left unattended. And so to me, I want to volunteer to be on somebody who's working with North Clackamas Parks and Rec to come up with a plan for this park, because I don't think our current plan is one that's actually feasible anymore. So that's my comment. Thank you.
So a couple of things. We have to, there's two parks, right? We have a master plan for Spring Park, and we have an agreement with Portland on Elk Rock Island, because it was theirs until whatever it was, 2-3 years ago. And in order to get that transfer, we had to agree to a number of things, which NCPRD did agree to and theoretically is doing. I actually believe we are pitching in some extra money for some of those things, but
Not anymore.
not anymore. We were for a couple of years.
We had
Okay.
set some money aside to do it, and then they were able to take it on. So at this point, we're not.
But you're right, Sid. It's never. This was the problem back when Portland had it, was that there was nobody whose jurisdiction it was that was willing to go out there. Portland would point to the Clackamas sheriffs. Clackamas sheriff would point at Portland. Somebody else would point at the Portland Park Rangers. It's never. So this at least narrows the group of people that people can point fingers at. But I do think that some conversations need to be had with NCPRD about managing that park, and we have a committee who does that very work, and Kelly is with them on a monthly basis.
Well, I was going to say, you're pointing to the PARB. There's also the Ferry Spark, as they call themselves, Friends of Elk Rock Island, and NCPRD does meet with them through Tanya. That is a forum for some amount of, trying to figure out uses that you want to deter and trying to keep people on paths. And there's some amount of stuff they can do, but really the problem is one of resources and manpower that, neither we nor they have. I will say some of these letters we got are overstated about the impact on the wildlife. Like someone who wrote late in the day said they'd seen no trillium. Well, I actually took pictures. The trillium were out in force in April. There were a ton of trillium on the island. Yeah. The what's called the vernal pools, the grassy area on the southeast corner, the
upstream side.
Yeah, the south end of the island, the grassy area. They get trampled every year. They come back every year. Yes, if we could do something to protect them, that would be great, because there are some unusual, rare plants that people come from all over the area. People who know these native plants come from all over the area to see. There are some measures that we could take, but to some extent, unless we get more resources for NCPRD by going out and helping them raise money that raise their, rate, and actually maybe have a ranger program. There's a lot of it that's just a resource issue that neither they nor us have.
And I just want to clarify that the we that you're using there is NCPRD. This is not the city that will do something about that problem. This is the management of the site. This is NCPRD. And they don't have the resources. I don't mean to point fingers at them, but this is a complicated site, and it's a complicated issue in Milwaukie because we own our parks, but we don't manage our parks, and a lot of people don't understand that. So I just want to be really clear about that when we are discussing our parks, that we're all under-resourced, but the problem of who doesn't have the resources in that case is NCPRD. And I want to add that I feel like there are a lot of things that are going for this park, and that we do have a wonderful vast number of people who care passionately about this place. A lot of them I don't think we even know, but we do know the people who come to the Friends of Elk Rock Island and Spring Park meetings. They all care deeply. They all volunteer. Anytime that there is a volunteer event, it's, you know, it takes no effort to get 30 people to show up to do work out on that island. And that's been delayed or it's hard to do in COVID times. We haven't been doing work parties out there, but I really feel like Friends of Elk Rock Island Spring Park could be tabling at the entrance to the park and providing education to people and teaching them about how this is a special place. We've had this partnership forming between NCPRD and the Oregon Native Plant Society. And they've come out and helped Tanya from NCPRD do plant surveys. That's been a really wonderful connection, and some of the volunteers with the Plant Society have been really interested in leading plant walks. They've done one, and I know another one is planned, and I've been talking with the main person who does those about could we develop a program for just doing general walks? You know, I have 10 years of experience as a volunteer naturalist with Metro, and it's been something I've always wanted to do, and I think I just need a volunteer naturalist buddy, you know. But there's this big piece of education that I think that there are people who would be excited to take responsibility for in terms of changing the understanding of what the park is for. So not just seeing it as a place to go and party and stay out late at night, but to understand that there's a lot of unique features out there and that it's a place that should be respected. And I also think that there's probably some better signage that could be done on behalf of all of those rules. You know, the signs are pretty tiny. The icons are pretty tiny that say no fires, no camping, get out at dusk. So that would be a conversation to have with NCPRD at a Ferry Spark meeting. And I think that's also something that the NDA, Island Station Neighborhood Association, could be approached about providing the funding to do, because they have been wonderful partners to that park and invested in it time and again. So before we go down the road of feeling like this is a hopeless case, I do think that there's some, maybe not low-hanging fruit, but I do think that there are actions that residents can take and people who love the park can take that could really make a difference here.
Thank you all. I wanted to say, I think that Sid's explanation was correct. I should say that I have the streets and they have the parks. I should make it more clear like that all the time. So I appreciate that summary. And Councilor Beatty, I really appreciated you talking about the resource constraints. And I just want to add a little bit to that. And obviously, Councilor Heisey, 100%. The reason why what's there is because there's so many passionate people that love Elk Rock Island and Spring Park, and it made it what it is. And because of that, actually, Spring Park, it's kind of out ahead. There's always been challenges, but it actually got its master plan, did a lot of great work, used quite a bit of the last local share money that came from Metro to help build it into what it is now. There are other places in the cities that are that have some work to do. One of the cities, just to be fair within these constrained resources, is Milwaukie Bay Park has to continue to be a pretty strong focal point, both for the city and for NCPRD right now, just to be able to get it over this next hurdle and get the final phase done. So unfortunately, even within the little resources we do have to stay pretty pointed towards a single outcome, and that is what we're doing. And right behind them, we actually have Scott Park. When we did the library improvements, Scott Park didn't come along for the ride entirely. There's some improvements, but that's been a priority. So just know that my kiddo is right now doing something. That we do work with NCPRD. Councilor Heisey's absolutely right. The district manages our parks for us. We are the only enforcement mechanism right now, though, is our PD. And so just know that when you're, like Councilor Beatty talked about, like a ranger program that doesn't exist. So there's no group of people that I'm hiding from someone that can go in and do the monitoring and the checking. at least on the city side, and the NCPRD currently isn't structured to do it in that way. And you're right, at this location, we're missing some of the easy button options like towing people out of a lot. We don't have some of the things that the other places have to get there faster. So anyway, I'm rambling, but I can help you if you want to talk about parks. I can talk to you about parks. I do talk to NCPRD. I don't work for NCPRD, but I work with our parks board and can help give some background on kind of what are the joint priorities of the district and the city at any given time, and help get information. But I won't find extra resources while I'm doing it.
I have a comment and a follow-up question about, you just mentioned it, towing, since we don't have a lot. So there is no park lot to tow vehicles from. We have public streets and public right-of-way. And so those are parking spaces, where it's allowed. And, I couldn't remember because it's been so long ago, but is Island Station one of the neighborhoods that has the ability to sign up for a residential parking program?
Anybody?
Yes.
So that would be the only way that we would be towing people. It would be in relation to a residential parking program. And so I was just thinking about this earlier. And then also when Sid made a comment about stickers, that would be the way that would be a mechanism by which we would tow. But I don't think, it wouldn't be in relation to the park closing, since those parking spaces are, just regular parking spaces in the right of way.
Well, I think the idea is to have, not to have no parking but neighbors. A residential parking program, as we've talked about it before, has been focused around, keeping commuters out of it. And this is kind of a different thing. And I think Sid's proposal is having a 10 p.m. Like at 10 p.m. you start towing people.
Right. So it would still be a park. It would still be in relation to the residential parking program. It wouldn't be related to, because we wouldn't be able to tell whether or not they were visiting the park or doing something else. And so it wouldn't be tied to the closure of the park. I think, there are requirements that program, you have to meet a certain level of density of parking problem. And then if the parking problem happens to be at a certain time, that's where that it could be designated. Those times could be designated. I have to believe that it's probably not actually a parking problem at 10 p.m. or later. That's all based on counts. We'd have to totally revisit the program to do something like that.
Scott, was there anybody else that wanted to comment on this?
I know of or saw. Nope.
Okay.
What do we know? The city manager said she was going to have a report. What do we know about the fire today?
It was actually 2 small fires that were lit on the island. There was not a witness to see who actually did the lighting. We do have somebody who is of interest that the police department did speak to. And the fire department was very appreciative that the fires were put out so quickly, and for the calls from the community, because they were able to get those fires out so quickly due to the dryness out on the island. It could have been devastating. So they appreciated everybody watching and being in touch.
So they thought they were purposefully set, or it was like a campfire that got out of control or something?
The fact that it was 2 sites on the island at the same time is what they're looking at.
And was it on the island proper, or was it on the still privately owned property that is on the other side of the slough? You keep muting yourself.
I couldn't actually get to my email and have the mute button down. Hold 1 minute. Let me pull it up. So it looks like one was on the north end of the actual island.
Okay.
And the other was on the south side of the island.
Okay.
So the way they named it is actually on the island.
Okay.
Some of the neighbors who saw it, and I'm not one who saw it, thought that it was on what we call the Little Island, which is the piece that we're going to have half ownership of as a result of the recent land use thing.
The police department did not specify any further than that, so I can't give you any more detail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next steps or thoughts or takeaways that
my next steps are honestly to close it down. So I got to close it down and tell everybody I'm closing it down. So this next week for me will be about posting the notices and sharing the information. We've been really quiet about this whole thing because we didn't want to draw a bunch of people on accident. So we haven't really advertised it. So most of what I do will just be posting signage down at the lot for the people that are using it. So hopefully if you're using it, you'll know and you won't get caught off guard. So that's kind of the goal for this week. As Steve mentioned, he does want to go back and get some additional counts without the barriers in place so we can get a sense of what's happening, particularly on Sparrow. And I think he's doing some additional work on, I think you can speak to that with a stop sign consideration of kind of, we have another pending stop sign request that he's still working through. I need to figure out where the bike rack's going to go. Right now there's actually no parking because I've got one ADA spot, one with bike parking and one with a loading zone. So we still need to talk through whether we're getting rid of the loading zone. I'm working with Kevin and NCPRD to see if there's room in the park to move the bike rack, because I still need the bike rack. The bike rack actually has been a success story. The bike parking has been good. We want to keep the bike parking, so I have to keep it somewhere, and it's a pretty tiny area. So I'm working with him on that. But yeah, those are kind of our immediate next steps. Steve, did I miss anything? I'm going to post an email address on the notices. So I'm going to collect information that way via the users of the lot. I suspect some of those will just be, I hate you for taking this away. But we may get some folks identifying themselves as users of this area that we might want to be reaching out to when we do the TSP or we do additional park planning efforts. So we will have that as a mechanism so that folks we can find them and reach back out to them when we talk about accessing natural areas and things like that.
When's the pork chop going in at the Sparrow and 22nd intersection?
For the River and 22nd project?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So we expect to have a meeting with the contractor in October, I think it is, and they will submit a schedule for their construction plans, and after that we'll know a lot more when that actually gets built. My guess, it'll be sometime spring, summer of next year.
Okay. Because that is likely to bring some traffic calming to Sparrow because it will control the turn off of 22nd onto Sparrow more than we have right now. Right now it's just this huge paved asphalt area, so you can swing pretty wide, and that will change.
Yeah, it'll make it a lot tighter turn there. Also be, there's other things we can do to improve traffic flow without stop signs. I think some no parking is warranted, especially in the summertime. So I'll be talking to Peter and to Kelly more about what we can do on a more permanent basis. I think the no parking on the south side of Sparrow was definitely needed this summer, and we're going to talk whether we want to make that a permanent addition or not.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, Kelly. Both of you put in a lot of time and effort on this project. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah, I think it was far more successful in a lot of ways than some folks would have indicated.
Than my negative staff report.
Well, you're using your report on people's feedback, so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it would help to know that we had the support to try this. So it was nice to know that we could go out there and give it our best and come back and tell you how it worked at the end. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything? Okay. After the regular session, council will hold a Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission meeting to watch that meeting, please stay on the Zoom call or continue to watch on the city's YouTube channel or Comcast channel 30 in the city limits. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the regular session.
I move to adjourn. Oh, Wilda.
Here I am, falling down on my job. What the heck? You know, I would move for adjournment of the regular city council session.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. We are adjourned. Okay.
Bye, Katie. Thank you.
Does anybody need a break before we go into the redevelopment meeting?
No,
Depends on how long we think it's going to be.
it's only supposed to be a half hour or less.
Okay.
Half hour? Okay. All right.
So do it. Get it
In
done.
that case, I call the Redevelopment Commission to order. Is there any discussion about the October 1st, 2019 and June 16th, 2020 Commission minutes? Then I would entertain a motion to approve those.
I'll move to approve the minutes as submitted.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the October 1st, 2019 and June 16th, 2020 Redevelopment Commission meetings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Citizen Advisory Committee formation, a discussion, and this will be led by our Commission Executive Director, Leila Aman.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Leila Aman, playing the role of your MRC Executive Director today. I also have Allison Wicks, who's our Development Project Manager. She should be on here with us, too, and she'll be talking more about the Citizen Advisory Committee. I'm going to go ahead, Scott. Can I go ahead and share my screen? Okay.
I made you a co-host, Leila.
Thank you. All right, can everyone see that presentation? Awesome. Okay. So, just a quick recap for folks. We adopted our urban renewal plan in 2016, and today we're talking about sort of our first real kickoff of implementation of that plan. In 2017, passed bylaws. Last year in October, we had a conversation about doing a 5-year action plan, which council supported, and then you further supported that effort when you approved the budget in June that appropriated $2 million in debt issuance in FY 2022. So with that, just to remind folks that this is the area outlined in blue. This kind of looks like a set of lungs to me as I look at it here now. I always see spatial patterns. It's a habit. I apologize. But this is our urban renewal district. So this is the area in which we can spend any tax increment financing. As I mentioned, the commission approved $2 million in debt issuance for fiscal year 2022. And then that combined with the tax increment we have already collected and project to collect by the end of fiscal year 22 gives us about $3 million to start with for the 5-year action plan. And before I dive too deep or turn this over to Allison on forming the committee, one of the things that one of the commissioners asked me to look at last time is how does this compare to what we forecasted when we did the urban renewal plan? And so I went back and spent some time looking at that plan and wanted to share with you a snapshot in time. So what I've pulled together is kind of this estimated versus actual. So what we had projected to have by the end of fiscal year 2020 in that URA plan, our urban renewal area plan, was $872,000 in just straight up tax increment that came into the district. You, I believe, had budget committee last night, and Bonnie shared with you the actuals for the end of the fiscal year had us at $512,000. So what we're seeing is just shy of 60% of what we estimated. So that's a pretty big difference, and that's not something that should be too deeply concerning to anyone. It's typical to make budget projections. Those are often based on assumptions about what will redevelop. Things don't often develop the way that we think. Some of the things I should note that did come into the district that were bigger projects, like Axletree, have the vertical housing tax zone overlay, so we won't actually see property taxes from that for another 9 years. So there's a lot of reasons for that. We could still hit our $92.5 million in maximum indebtedness over the life of the district. But I think it's a good measure for us to sort of look at where we're at. And what I would propose is we start to use our budget forecasting as a way to anticipate what we think will be coming into the district as we do the 5-year plan. To give you some sense of that, our budget, so I looked at the last budget, not the one that we just adopted in 22, but looked at what the projections were for FY 2019 and 2020. And according to our budget, we should have gotten 495. So you compare that to the actuals, which is 512. Our budget estimates were within 3% of the of what we have. So it's actually 3% above. So we will work with the finance department as we enter into the 5-year action plan, and we'll make projections based on what are in our budget projections, so that we are working with, I think, a realistic and a conservative budget. So before I barrel on forward, I did want to pause just for a moment and ask if anyone had any questions about that or concerns to chat about right now.
Well, I certainly was concerned when I saw the numbers in the staff report, but I think you explained pretty well why they're not what we had projected. And I mean, I do think that, vertical housing tax, we're going to likely see that on Coho Point as well. That is going to kind of put a kink in, in the projections that we had going into this.
Is the McFarland site, is that a vertical housing tax credit?
It is.
Project? It is? Okay.
Yeah. So you can imagine in 10 years when those are up, we'll see a pretty significant increase. And, I think it's important to weigh it's a very good point. I think we made these estimates. I tried to get under the hood. I could only get so far. This was done well before I arrived here, but that those probably wasn't assumed in those assumptions when we did that analysis. But the trade-off is that you are able to leverage housing to get constructed now by using that vertical housing tool, and that it will come onto the tax rolls within the time frame that we have. So I anticipate, year 10, we'll start to see a little bit different picture 10 years from now. And, one thing I would note is that that's not an inconsistent pattern. What I've seen in other urban renewal districts, the ramp up takes time. And then usually a lot of the resources come in towards the middle or to the end of the life of the district. So it's just something to keep in mind. But it's just, if you've noticed, I get sensitive. We start talking about $92 million. It's like, yeah, that's what we project. But we also got to follow the trends and kind of see what we're actually getting in, and then find ways to leverage that money the best way that we can to achieve the projects that we have in the plan. And so I think there's a ton we can do over the next several years with that $3 million. Over the life of the 5-year plan, it'll be more than that. But I do feel like we can accomplish a lot in that time frame with what could be seen as a little amount of money.
When going back to McFarland, I would guess they're not, we will see some more tax from them than we would from Axletree or Coho, because they're not going to be all, it's based on how many stories you are, right?
Yes, and I can't exactly remember if they're getting the full 80% abatement or not. So I will get back to you on that, but I think they're between 60 and 80, and the maximum is 80% on a building. Okay. Well, if anything comes up throughout the presentation, I'm still here, so don't hesitate to ask. With that, is Allison here?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, and I'm going to run the slides and try to do a better job this time.
Great. Good evening.
Councilors, Mayor, Allison Wicks, I'm the Development Project Manager for the City of Milwaukee, and I'll just give a quick overview of the role of the Citizens Advisory Committee and our plans for creating it. So the purpose of the Citizens Advisory Committee is to advise the Commission on decisions regarding plan implementation. It's laid out in the bylaws who should be on the committee and the makeup of the committee membership. It's a 9-person committee with 2 ex officio members, and we think that this group would also play a key role as we move forward on the 5-year action plan. This is the list from the bylaws. Oh, you can go back to the list, Layla. So the Citizens Advisory Committee is supposed to be made up of property owners and business owners and residents from within the boundaries of the urban renewal area, and then persons with extensive knowledge of finance, accounting, economics, real estate development or land use planning, affordable housing development, and public services, utilities, or infrastructure. And then also a member of the MRC, so a city councilor who will be the chair, and then 2 ex officio members, one from Clackamas Fire and one from NCPRD. For the Citizens Advisory Committee recruitment, I'm thinking of a process that's similar to the City Hall Blue Ribbon Committee process that we recently went through. So sharing information in the pilot, social media, website, and then also direct outreach and following up with interested parties that have reached out to us over the years, including talking to neighborhood district associations and the DMVA. We would have an online application process and then follow up with interviews as needed to kind of fill those designated slots. So we have 2 questions for you guys tonight. Does the commission have any additional guidance on the selection process? And the commission is asked to identify one of its members to serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee as the chair and another to serve as an alternate. That's it. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or discussion.
So let's start with the first one. Is there any additional guidance that anybody has at this point on this selection process?
So, I mean, I think, we've run a lot of these processes. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I guess once you get applications, what do you see as the interview, or we did an interview process for the Blue Ribbon and the whatever the other one was, the CPIC, yeah.
I think it would be Zoom interviews instead of in-person interviews, and maybe only interviewing if there was like competition between those different slots that someone's trying to fill. Or maybe some people meet more than one.
Yeah, I can think of a couple of people I would love to have serve on this committee who would check a couple of boxes. Just in terms of outreach, I'm thinking we got a really interesting response to both the CPIC and the Blue Ribbon committees, and we had a lot of good applicants for both of that, and we weren't able to use them all. So maybe just doing a little outreach to those 2 applicant pools and saying, hey, there's another opportunity to be involved.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because there were so many people that it would have been great to plug in. They may not fit here, but.
And given our new council goal around diversity, equity, inclusion, I think also bringing that lens to this recruitment process is something I'm interested in doing.
Yeah, and I think Anne has a very good list of folks that maybe we could also include in that outreach.
Absolutely. And one of the things for this area in particular is we have a number of businesses that are owned actually by our BIPOC community in these areas, which I think are important voices here.
Yep.
Is Northwest Housing Alternatives in the blue area? It is. Okay. Yeah, it would be wonderful if some folks from there applied.
As in staff or as in residents?
Yes. Well, one of the categories we have on there is people with expertise in housing and affordable housing. So, and you can have that expertise from either side.
Will all these members need to live in the city of Milwaukie, or is there opportunity for people who are interested in Milwaukie but live outside the city limits to apply?
That's a good question. I think that we should check the bylaws and make sure.
I mean, my recollection is that the first few categories are, there are residents in there, but my recollection is we realize we may not have the expertise for some of those categories and people who live in the city.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main reason I asked that question, is because immediately, I can think of like somebody in accounting and somebody in housing. They live close in, but they aren't currently citizens of Milwaukie.
Mm-hmm. From a quick glance at the bylaws, it looks like it's silent on, besides the ones that are a resident within the URA district. So, if someone lived in Oak Grove and had an interest in the district, I think that.
Yeah, well, and especially like Lisa said, because we have those different categories, and we've done that in many other committees before, or several. I wouldn't say many. I don't mean that because I don't know that for a fact, but in some committees before. So, and I know in some of the others, just generally, folks can live outside the city and beyond. Like Planning Commission is one that they don't have to live within the city. So, yeah,
They're never limited as to how many.
Yeah. You don't want to.
You should
overabundance, but
yeah, we wouldn't want to have half the committee living outside.
No.
But,
And business owners do not need to be Milwaukie residents. Yeah.
Milwaukie residents or their businesses in Milwaukie. I mean, I can think of offhand again, a couple of people whose business is in Milwaukie, but their personal residence isn't in Milwaukie. And I can think of things the other way around too. A great business owner who lives in Milwaukie, but her business is outside of Milwaukie. So, yeah. The one that's easy to nail down is residents, right? We got that one.
Okay. Well, and you can feel free to send us ideas or thoughts as they come up, or send folks to Allison, or send Allison probably better their contact info and she can reach out. But we just wanted to initiate this conversation with you now to get your wheels spinning, also assign one of you to the committee so you're tethered to it then, and then you have incentive to help us get some folks. Because I'll say this is an important committee. They're all important. But this committee will actually be really engaged and involved in how resources are getting spent, how projects are being prioritized. And so having that wide distribution of folks that represent the interests that are in the bylaws, but also have the socioeconomic and the diversity that we want to see in our city. So we want to see this committee be reflecting on many of those lenses. So just put your thinking hats on and don't feel like if you don't tell us tonight, it's too late. Reach out, share that, but just start thinking about folks that would be a good fit for this.
when do you expect to start the recruiting? The application process, I mean?
I think we could start in probably early October, and then maybe by the end of the year have a committee back to council for appointment.
So as to the council rep, I mean, I was the council person on the task force that developed the district, but I really feel tapped out because of CPIC and also sort of starting to get into the NCPRD stuff with WILDA. So I'm not really interested in volunteering for this one.
Well, I am interested. I feel like I don't know a lot about economic development, and this seems like a really good opportunity to learn. And I think this is going to do some really cool stuff. So I would be interested.
The only thing I would add is that part of our job for me and Allison is education of this whole committee. What is, so don't let that dissuade you. I think we're pretty good teachers, right? And we can really, and that's part of our job is when we bring people in, we'll hopefully have some citizens as well that aren't familiar with all of our acronyms. And part of our job is to get those folks up to speed and have them be well-informed representatives of this work. So we will help whomever steps up to get there for sure.
Yeah, and then if Kathy takes that one seat, then we still need an alternate.
I think it's a good idea for good measure.
I stay out of the path of buses, but I can make no guarantees.
I'm also interested in this work, so I'd be happy to be your alternate.
Perfect. So do we need a motion on all of that, or accept what they said and put their names down?
Just for grins, let's have a motion.
I move to appoint Kathy Heisey as the primary person for the urban renewal with the CAC, and Council President Angel Faulkner as the alternate.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to have Kathy Heisey be the primary representative on the community, the Redevelopment Commission and Advisory Committee, and Angel Faulkner to be this alternate. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Congratulations. Have an excellent time.
Great, you guys. Thank you.
It's going to be awesome. We're so excited. Welcome to the team.
This kind of work is so fascinating. I mean, it's part of what I did in California, and you'll love it. You get to help make big decisions. Not that we haven't already made big decisions, but things that you see actually kind of happen. It's awesome.
As long as we don't have 8 a.m. meetings.
Not on my watch.
7 a.m. 7 a.m.
Oh, no, wrong direction.
All right. Are there any further commission reports? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. We are adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.